Donald Trump is worth $2.5 billion, which is a lot of money, but it's not enough money to make the Forbes 400. This year, he falls $400 million short. And that's mostly because he's lost $600 million since the beginning of the pandemic. The pandemic has been great for technology entrepreneurs. So people in Silicon Valley have added billions of dollars to their fortunes as everybody goes online while they're working from home. However, for somebody like a New York City real estate mogul, the pandemic has been a disaster. People are not going into office buildings. Tourists aren't coming to New York City in nearly the numbers that they were before. And shoppers are staying away from places like Fifth Avenue, where Donald Trump owns significant amounts of property. In 2016, after Donald Trump won the election, he faced a choice, whether or not to hold on to his business. Most people thought that he was going to sell. Trump even suggested that he was going to get rid of all of his assets in a series of tweets that he issued in November of 2016. But when the day finally came in January of 2017, just before he took office, he said that he, in fact, was going to hold on to his business. This was against what all of the ethics experts had suggested to him, and in hindsight, it was a terrible business decision. The problem is that his business hasn't performed very well at all over the last 4 or 5 years. So first, the presidency has damaged his brand. Companies don't want to partner with Donald Trump anymore because although they might appeal to about 50% of the American public, they're not going to appeal to the other 50%. And no brand wants to take on that sort of risk. So that was a big problem for him. Then, of course, you have the pandemic, which really damaged the value of hotels, of office buildings, and also of retail real estate. So in hindsight, that move cost Trump billions of dollars. If he had divested at the start and had sold off all of his holdings, even if he had paid the most possible capital gains tax that he possibly could have, and then took all of the proceeds and put them in the S&P 500, his fortune today would be worth $4.7 billion. That would be enough still for him to make the $2.9 billion cutoff of the Forbes 400, and it'd be a whole lot more than his $2.5 billion fortune that he currently holds. But he might not have even had to pay those capital gains taxes because there's a rule that when people join the government, oftentimes they're encouraged to divest. And one of those encouragements is that they say you don't have to pay capital gains tax once you sell off a bunch of stuff that's going to present conflicts for you while you're in government. And if Trump had been able to secure one of those agreements, which he likely would have been able to do, then he wouldn't have started with a $1.1 billion tax penalty at the beginning. Instead, he would have just gotten to take his then $3.5 billion fortune, plow that, for example, right into the S&P 500. And if he had done that, then today he would be worth $7 billion. So he'd be $4.5 billion richer than he is today. And he wouldn't have had to worry about all of the ethics headaches and conflicts that he had to deal with over the last 5 years. Donald Trump cares an inordinate amount about his ranking and position on the Forbes 400. Even before he got into politics, he said that there is no one who cares as much about where he or she ranks on that list as Donald Trump. So certainly the fact that he's no longer on the list is likely to bother him. One indication that we know why he really cares about being on the list is because he lied in the first place to get on it. He said that he held a significant amount of his father's fortune at a time when he did not. And the reporter who was putting together the numbers at that time later ended up digging up the tapes of his conversation with someone who he thought was an executive at the Trump organization. But upon further listening, realized was Donald Trump himself posing as one John Barron and claiming that he had all sorts of assets that he did not in fact have. Then during the presidential campaign, Trump, in the midst of all of the craziness that was going on, took hours out of his day in the fall of 2015 to sit down with Forbes and go through asset by asset what he thought that all of his companies were worth. Every once in a while, he would say a number that was accurate, but most of them were not just partially inflated or up 10% or something like that, but wildly inflated. So we know that this is someone who cares an inordinate amount about where Forbes puts him on its list, and that it's a way that he measures himself. In The Art of the Deal, his famous book that he came out with in the 1980s, he said, I don't really care that much about money, which, believe that if you want. But then he said, but I do view it as a way of keeping score. Well, by that score, Trump is getting beaten right now, not only by the overall stock market, but also by the rest of the billionaires in the country.